I tell you where I'd like to start is what happened in the restaurant that night when Dennis Mannion came in.
It's funny you say that because I when Dennis Mannion came, he actually overheard me at a different table. And I had a regular guest that came in actually that actually met him when I first started at Old Ever Grill. I was off my shift and I ran into this guy who always comes in around Vietnam Veterans time. And I was just kind of telling about the culture and stuff. And then he told me why he was in town. And then I told him my story, and I was like, "Oh, I was part of the Vietnam, that time of history." And then he was so moved. And then, long story short, his name is Doug Bishop. He came back and brought more friends, and told him my story to his friends. And I met him at lunch, and then the same day I worked after my shift, met him another day, and Dennis was heard this story, touched my hand, was so moved, and was like, thank you for sharing and letting me hear your story. And then he came back another day and just said, well, I got interviewed by Michael, and I think you guys would be great. And that's kind of how we are here today.
I see. So Dennis was in your restaurant. He didn't know that you were there.
Yeah.
He happened to be there and overheard you telling your story to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was with a group of veterans when I was telling my story, and then he overheard, and then I told him the story, and then he was moved, and so then he kind of like basically like was so moved, touched my hand, and was like, "Thank you so much. You're a blessing. We're so happy you're here." And then later on, a day or two, he's got a hold of the restaurant of my managers and saying, "Hey, is there any way I can contact this girl?"
Hmm.
And they were like, "Well, we can't give you for information, obviously, but I will relate this message to her." And so then they gave me his number, and then he came back actually just to be like, "Hey, did you get my message? I've been trying to contact because I was very hard to contact back because when I work, I can't use my cell phone and stuff like that." So I didn't recognize the number. And so then my managers told me about him. And so then he came back and was like, "Hi." And, we got a picture taken, and then he explained more in detail. And then here we are today. And here's Michael's number. Please get in contact. I'll be in the group message with you. So that way he knows who you are, mean me. And that's how we started. We started that group message. So
So he wasn't the only veteran in the restaurant that night.
no, he wasn't. I mean, it was that I worked on Veterans Day, and it worked out that I happened to like connect. And a lot of times I tell my story just because I'm so proud of it, of the Operation Babylift, since I was part of one of the survivors there. It's just kind of like I always find out like first from guests, where are they from, where, why, what brings you into Old Abbott. And then once I have the opportunity, then I kind of tell my story depending on how like this, the situation is. And and veterans is such a big thing here in DC. So, I'm blessed, and I was part of history, that it seems, a no-brainer to like share my story to all veterans because I'm part of that, so
Hmm.
yeah. And I think my sister teases me because she's like, now that I work in restaurants, she's like, I should get a pizza cut of that since I was the one that saw you on TV, and I picked you. And so she teases me like I'm gonna have to, write a book, and then I get a pizza cut of it, because I mean, you tell guests, all the guests about your story. You're including me. I should get part of the tips.
Right. Right. So how's that working out for her?
um, I haven't given her a check yet.
Not yet. Yeah. All right. it's all in escrow. It's in a trust.
Exactly. Trust.
Yeah.
She'll get all my money once I move forward.
Right, right. So, Leah, when you tell your story to somebody in a restaurant, how do you tell it?
You know, depending on, like I said, the situation. So, like for example, just the other day, I had these couples came in and they were I said, where are you from? And and they're like, oh, we're from New York. And I'm like, oh, my father was born and raised in Brooklyn. Like, oh, we lived in Brooklyn. And then like, "Hey, did you move a lot?" And I go, yeah, I'm not originally from New York area. I was actually was born in Vietnam, and then I was adopted in New Orleans. And they're like, oh my gosh, really? And I was like, yeah. And then I would say, well, I was actually part of the Operation Babylift. And I always ask the guests, do you know about that? And they'll say usually yes or no, because depending on the generation, if they're older couple, they probably would know. And so then I would just kind of go with the flow and, start saying, I was part of Operation Babylift, and I was cared by nuns since it was around Catholic Charities at the time, yada yada. And then I would just keep on going, and then it would just I couldn't stop. And so people are
Yeah,
always so moved about the story. So
sure, sure.
yeah.
So let me ask you that again because yada yada is not very useful in a
I'm
podcast.
sorry.
I want you to actually tell me the story.
Okay. All right. So the Operation Babylift, I was adopted. I was lived in New Orleans. I was part of the Catholic Charities. I was last cargo flight to get out of Vietnam War. And me and another boy and other babies got sent to all over the different states. And I happened to fly from Vietnam to California, and then I ended up in New Orleans. And New Orleans is a big community of Vietnamese area of Catholic charities as well. So I was cared by nuns. And around that time in 1975, um, I was adopted on April 25th, 1975. But by a couple of months before that, it was breaking news saying that there was two orphan babies coming into New Orleans. And my parents heard about it. The adoptive parents who adopted me heard about the news, and since it was a big deal, and then my sister just happened to be home by herself with a sitter and saw me on TV walking down the hallway holding hands with a Catholic nun and me and the other boy. And she was like, oh my gosh, I want to adopt a sister. And so when she told my parents when they came home, they're like, hey, turn on the TV. Do you know about this breaking news about these, orphan Vietnamese babies? And they're like, yeah, we kind of heard about it. And so she's like, we need to do this. I want a sister. So they had thought about it when they heard about the news, my parents. And so they were like, let's call the number and see what we need to do. So they called the orphanage or the church, I guess, where they were where I was being cared at. And they're like, okay, well, all we ask is, fill out some information. And then if you get the phone call, we'll need to do separate interviews. So it came to that I was picked over by 100 interviews. My family finally got the call. I think because my dad had a really good place at work. He was doing very well. He worked for Western Electric at the time, then became AT&T. He had a good, job. And so I think he was able to get a little bit push more to getting me on the list faster. And so it came to that they did the interview, they got called back, and my parents, one at the end, were thinking, my father was like, I hope I get the daughter. But, my mother was like, well, we'll get blessed if we get the boy or the girl. And my sister still was like hoping to get me and get a sister. And long story short, they got that phone call. And at the other end, my sister's just praying and hoping it's me. And they said another family wanted the boy, and you are, you guys got the girl. So it was my sister's wish, and my parents was so overly joyed. So
Mm,
that's why I'm here today.
got it. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for telling me that story. So I'd like to go back through it again, but more slowly, and I'll ask some questions, and we'll go a little deeper on some of that. But
Yeah.
that was great. Um, so you were born in Vietnam, clearly
Mhm.
toward the end of the war, right? Do you have any idea how old you were when they put you on that plane?
No, because it was what I was told. It was like so fast, and all they were trying to do is just try to get as many babies in this cargo flight, which was the last cargo flight.
So you were an
Um,
infant?
I was like 2 or 3 years old.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and the way the nuns had said, they're like they over about over 100 babies in this flight. And supposedly the story was said that I had like kind of like two papers on me a little bit. And then the name that I was born with, the name was a Vietnamese name. And the name was Nguyen Tao Ton. So when I got adopted, my parents decided to keep my middle name. And then, of course, kept the last name that I got adopted, which is Heslin. And then my father and mother named me Leah. So
Mm,
I'm Leah Tal Heslin.
mm. And so you said your parents and your sister were living in New Orleans at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you happened to end up in a Catholic orphanage in New Orleans. Do you remember the name of that?
I don't. And I was trying to look at papers, but yeah, I remember, um, you know, when they gave me the papers, they told me where I was from, which was in Gia Dinh, which is southern part of Vietnam, so it's south part of Vietnam. Um, and so around that time, it was like, Vietnam had north and south at the time, and it was part of like kind of like Saigon area. So when I was in the orphanage in Vietnam, so right at the end, of the war, and then they just kind of like, government at the time when the war was on ended, they had the flights, the last cargo, and they took as many babies they could, and it was, probably, if not less, or around 100 babies they tried. And they also, when you Google Operation Babylift, they also call it shoebox baby, because they tried to fit some babies who were infants in sizes and shoe boxes so they can fit as many in the cargo flight.
Mm,
Obviously, in the cargo flights, there's no seats, and some had seats, so they can fit as many Vietnamese baby because of the end of the Vietnam War.
okay. So you had already been orphaned
Mhm.
before you got on that flight.
Right. Well, the story is said that I don't know what happened to my birth mother. They weren't sure, but they knew kind of the story that supposedly my father surrendered me at the orphanage because they thought maybe he was military, and so he wouldn't be able to take care of me. So, as far as don't know if I have any other siblings, obviously relatives, and at that time, it was kind of hectic, and I wouldn't have known if any papers who would, and I'm sure there was probably some kind of relatives around amongst all those babies, but who knows,
Yeah.
I have newspaper articles of me of the day I was adopted because it was such a big thing at that time.
In New
Uh,
Orleans.
yes.
Yeah.
So it was head news, it was day of adoption day. And in the same day, luckily, the boy that flew with me that was cared by the nuns got adopted the same day I did. And so that was a really good story as well. And then long story later, I reconnected with that boy. But um they gave us a tape of the recording. They came to the house since it was such a big thing. News reporters came and then, interviewed and watched, kind of like showing the video of like me meeting my parents the first time. And but then we then later turned it into like, back then it was beta. And then, but we then turned it to VHS, but then we kind of lost it and moving because we moved as I grew up. So yeah, I don't know if it's in boxes or if it's somewhere out there, but yeah, I'm sure they can get that footage. I have no idea, but luckily I have those newspaper articles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a little bit of time before this thing needs to be put together. Maybe I'll do some sleuthing and see if I can find out which stations would have run that. It would have been
So the date was April 25th, 1975 was the day I was adopted.
right, but I'm trying to get at the newscast that your sister saw.
Oh, yeah.
So that would have been how much earlier do you think that would have been? Like how much time passed between her seeing that report and you getting adopted?
So the way my mother said, she thinks if, a lot of times when you wait for time, something like that feels like either too long, it takes forever, or it's normally shorter. But the way my mother said, I think it would only really went maybe 6 weeks or so
Wow.
in the process. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
from like
fast.
the first time they heard about the news to them, my sister saw me on TV from then until they started getting on the process of getting the application in and trying to adopt me.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, I'm going to see what I can find. Maybe I'll be able to unearth something.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't that
Yeah.
be fun? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So, but the newscast, the news reporting, the coverage of you meeting your parents for the first time,
Mhm.
uh, you have seen that.
I have seen that.
And
Yeah.
I
Been a
mean,
long time, but I do have it right in my memory. And it's funny and weird. Like I don't remember, like coming over or anything like that. But sometimes I have visions and like just sometimes dreams in and out. And sometimes I think about like the day that I was adopted. I kind of remember some of the specifics, but other than that, it's been but like growing up, kind of remember some situations, me being scared of some situations. Like 4th of July growing up was one of my, I guess my mother said, I was always terrified of the fireworks and all that. For a while, I was like scared. So, and I don't know if me becoming over here and maybe I heard those noise from the war. I don't know. But then later in life, I saw the lights and I started loving fireworks. So the tragic then became beautiful. But I remember seeing the video. The first thing is I remember I was scared of my father at first. And I think they said I was scared of males. But when I saw
when you say you remember, you mean you're older, you're watching the tape from the day of your adoption, and you're
yeah.
looking at your young face, and what you see is fear.
Yeah. Like and even my mother said it. Like I was very hesitant to meet my dad at first. And I went to her first. Like I sat in her lap, I felt comfortable. And they said I must have been really, really hungry. But when they gave me an apple, it was like I was excited and I ate it out. And there's a picture of me eating an apple. Like, it was like, here's a gift. And I just took it in. So, but yeah, but then eventually, of course, I was, has always been my daddy's little girl. So that little fear after a while was to this day. Fortunately, my father passed away. So, I was always daddy's little girl to him and to me. So, yeah.
That's sweet. How long ago did he pass away?
It will be March. Oh, no, we just had his memorial. So it's 13 years now.
13 years.
Yeah.
So what are First of all, what are your parents' names?
Carol with an E, Carol Diane Heslin. And then my father was Thomas Edward Heslin.
What what are some of the earliest memories that you have of life with your family?
Um, a lot probably is different stages. Like I remember some of the things in New Orleans, like, playing some with the kids. And then when I moved to Chicago area in Highland Park. And I remember a lot of growing up in that age because it was like kindergarten to like sixth grade. Um,
Yeah, I'm also adopted, um, but I didn't find out until I was 45,
oh, really?
and I look enough like my adoptive parents that I never really. I mean, there were times that I questioned it, but I never, it never really occurred to me that it might be true.
Mhm.
Because they're Caucasian and I'm Caucasian, and we look enough alike, I guess. Uh,
Right?
that it was never a question for me. Uh,
Mhm.
but as you mentioned, it was fairly obvious to you early on, right?
Yeah.
You don't look much like the rest of the
Yeah.
family.
I mean, obviously, growing up, some people are like, oh, that's your sister, or oh, that's your parents. But I never thought of it like, yeah, of course that's my mom and sister. But it's so funny as I got older, and I think because your behavior, growing up with your sister, it's like an automatic, like, oh, of course they're sisters, because the way you dress, your mannerisms and stuff like that. It's funny, sometimes our friends are like, new people that I meet, like, oh, this is my mom, it's my sister. I'm like, oh, you guys look so great, and like no question, they're like, wait, that's your mom, that's your sister, because I think we're so close in family, and the way I was raised, and how, like, my manners, and my sister just kind of like my best friend. And so you know some people will think like we look alike, which is funny, like we don't look alike, but
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. If you were, somewhere between 2 and 3, you almost certainly had some language by then.
right, yeah.
I mean,
You know and most language was just pretty much like Vietnamese.
mhm.
But it was only, I didn't talk very much. But then they said it's funny. It's so ironic. I didn't talk much then, but like, you can't shut me up now.
Right, making up for lost time.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. I'm the opposite. I talked nonstop as a kid, and now I'm quiet. Um, well, that's not entirely true.
Well, you're on a podcast now. Now you talk all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. When I talk a lot, but I don't always talk.
There you go. I am such a strong person, and I'm kind of like sometimes could be a class clown, or I was one of the kids that actually wanted to be in like my circle, which I was the popular girl, and I didn't know when I was trying to be in the popular group and didn't know. But so yeah, like I pretty much hold my own, but like most of the time I think my dad was always the one who's like, who's picking on you? Who do I need to talk to? And I'm like, oh, or my mother would be the same way, you know. So, but sometimes I was always afraid to tell my mom because I feel like she would be the one to like, well, which parent do I need to talk to? But my dad would be, which kid do I need to talk to? So
Yeah.
but then like, and then after I moved to Indiana University, I was there from like senior year all the way to, I was there for almost 20 years. So that's a big chunk of where I was until I moved here to DC, you know, um, a later year. So, um, until now, I'm saying I've been here for now almost 3.5, 4 years now in DC.
Oh, so not that long.
Yeah, not that I'm still fresh here in
Yeah.
DC. First year I moved here was August. Well, I got an apartment in June 1st of 2019, so right before the pandemic.
Hmm.
And then I didn't actually move here until like July because I had to go back and then get stuff and move. And then I got the job at Old Ebbitt not until August. And then right in March 16th, 2020, we got pandemic. So,
Right.
but yeah. So yeah, I've been here. But
So
you know,
what brought you to DC? I know your sister's there, obviously, right?
um, so prior to that, my sister, you know, been working through IU after my dad um had worked at IU and passed. We had been there. My sister was a deputy mayor, and then she, after deputy mayor, she then started teaching.
In Bloomington?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, because long story short, she, her field was in more like journalism, and she had her own company, doing like um, um, marketing and all that. So then she was looking for jobs out in DC. So then she found a job. So then we decided to uproot and move with her.
I see. And by we, you mean you and your mother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So we moved first, and then my mother came later, more in September of 2019.
Okay.
So yeah.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned another little boy who ended up in the same orphanage, right? Same flight, same
Yep.
orphanage in New Orleans. You mentioned that you connected with him later.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So his name is Timothy Johnson. And we got adopted the same day. And then, he went on, with his family. And, we kind of like um connected as little kids, but they moved. And then I didn't really spend time with him because I don't think he lived in New Orleans. Or his family was close to where my family lived in New Orleans, so we never like grew up hanging out. But he later on um tried to find me. Um and so Vietnam, Operation Babylift, have done kind of like a every year they have a memorial of the anniversary. Um they go to different places in the States where there is a Vietnam memorial. So the first year he tried to find me was 25-year anniversary, and it was in Colorado. And we didn't know about it at the time, that this anniversary even existed until like later on. Um, then he tried to find me. At that time, we were living in Indiana, Bloomington, Indiana, and he was living in Alabama. And so, long story short, he thought that I would be there at the 25th year anniversary in Colorado, and we weren't. So then he was determined to find me. So he and his father at the time had like a company they ran that had did a lot of things working with internet and um I can't think of the term, but he was trying to find me on the internet at the time when they had the big thing of the internet, and tried to find me back in the day when they had phone books.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to find me in a phone book with my name, and he tried to call the Catholic charity place, the Catholic church, and he got a hold of one of the nuns that was still living, and asked some questions like, "Hey, do you know the family of the Heslins?" And, as a government, they could only answer yes and no questions. So he was like, "Well, do you know where they moved?" And they're like, "Well, all we know is they had moved to Chicago." And then he asked a few other questions. So he started searching. And the only Heslins that came up was in Bloomington, Indiana. And it said Carol Thomas. And at that time, I had my own house. And, we had phone books then, and the yellow pages and all that. And my name was listed. So that also being that back in the 90s, we had, voice messages, answer machines, caller ID. So I saw this name came up, Timothy Johnson. And I'm like, I just didn't think of it because that was the kid that was, adopted. I just didn't think of it because, Timothy Johnson is kind of like a John Doe name, right? So he called, left a message, and he's like, "Hey, this is Timothy Johnson. If this is Leah Heslin, please call me back." Well, that was the one message. So then he called again and said, "Hey, this is Timmy Johnson. I have the newspaper article in front of me. Your parents are Carol Heslin, Thomas Heslin." So that he wanted to make sure that this is not some random person. So when I told my parents about it, they're like, "Oh, just call him back. I mean, what hurt could it be?"
Mm-hmm.
So I called him back and he automatically says, "Is this Tim? Is this Leah Heslin?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Oh, I found you. So he just kind of like said, the reason why he was trying to find me is like he thought I would be there at the anniversary. And then since I wasn't, he was determined to find me a different way. So
And how long did it take him? How much time passed between the anniversary event and the time that you were?
say it was a good probably 4 years or so, because
Wow.
pretty soon after that was going to be the 30-year anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we just kind of caught up. And then, back then we had like MySpace, that time. Facebook wasn't even really around then. So, and then of course I had I didn't have really, cell phones. I think maybe the old flip phone one, the cellular one. And and then of course internet changed, my email changed, I got a cell phone. Um and so we like lost contact. And so the 30-year anniversary, he had told me before we lost contact, was going to be in Vietnam. But at that time, it wasn't feasible. It wasn't, you know,
That's a big trip.
easy for my parents or anything to go there. So time had passed, obviously years. And then when I was trying to do the reverse. I wanted to find him. Like, how can I get back to finding him? Like how he's doing and yada. Sorry. And so trying to find him. So finding Timothy Johnson, Alabama is like looking for, Joe Smith, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't give up. And, I even had a friend of mine that knew my story and she was trying to help me. Well, then later on, when we got Facebook, and the weird thing about it, how it came about, he found me. And I happened to be in Atlanta with my mother for a surprise 90th birthday for my great aunt. And somehow my mother's picture came up as a recognition to him on a Facebook saying, "You have a mutual friend." And so then that's how I found me. And now we talk, you know, every once in a while. We've got new numbers now,
Mm-hmm.
so every once in a while we'll wish our birthdays, say hello. I liked all of his, like, he moved on and had a family. And in fact, his story moved on because his parents adopted more Vietnamese babies
Mm.
in growing up. Like he's got a big family, and then his parents, divorced, but his father really wanted to help and get more adopt babies. So I think he has like maybe like, if not quote me for sure, but I think he has like four more siblings that are from overseas.
Wow.
Couple from Vietnam, maybe a couple from other Asia, but yeah. So
Wow.
his story went on.
Those people are amazing.
Yes.
Are you connected at all to the larger sort of Operation Baby Lift community?
You know, I'm not, and I'm sure it would be easy for me to, because when I then later I had told him, I found out there was going to be another anniversary of the 40th anniversary, and it was going to be in Homedale, New Jersey, which I was able to go because my cousins lived in Homedale, and it was like a no brainer for me to go because I was easy to go to New Jersey. We had gone to visit New Jersey a lot. Um, I was living in Indiana, of course, but we always go to New Jersey and, see family. So when I heard about it, my cousin's like, "Yes, we're like right down the street from that. We didn't even, until you mentioned it, we had no idea this whole entire time there was a Vietnam memorial uh, building. And so they went with me, and it was very nice. There was about probably like 25 to 30 other Vietnamese Operation Babylift came to the anniversary. They took a big group picture. Um, and it was an all day. There was a in front of the building, at the Vietnam Memorial, they had the huge cargo flight, which is kind of like the one probably I was in. It's a huge one in front of the building. And then inside the building, obviously, they had a story, like all pictures, kind of like a Vietnam War wall. Like they showed the all the military, the Vietnamese military, and pictures. Then they did like a kind of like a screen play of kind of like that time when we were adopted, of the Catholic nuns and like how they were trying to save these children, and kind of their nurse, the nun stories, and survivors, and so it was very moving, and I was glad I was able to go. And here we are, pretty soon it's going to be the 50th anniversary soon, but yeah, it was, and um I even spoke to I think there was maybe one, there was a nun or a nurse that was there at that time. And then there was a lot of other people who were like, hey, you should write a book. Here, take our card, and yeah, and this will help you a lot. Further on, we would love to hear more about your story. And so, but yeah, I wish I could have like gotten some other information, but I'm sure I can probably find it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Facebook group for Operation Babylift
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
All connect with each other, so I know that community exists and is pretty active. I don't know if that'd be interesting for you or not. I was just curious whether that was something you.
Yeah, and and that's why it's so, to me it's weird, because I'm all about like connecting and stuff. So I don't know why I didn't more so like reach out more, but maybe after today I will get onto that group, and a new time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
who knows, right?
yes,
So, did you ever go back to Vietnam in your life?
I didn't. I've always wanted at some point, and still it could. I just have to find someone really who wants to go with me. It's a long, long trip. I've always kind of wanted my parents to kind of go, but when we thought, we could, probably it was probably too longer in years. My father doesn't do very well on long trips. He had a hip replacement done, and so being in the plane that long, that would have been, and I think my mother wouldn't want to go without him. So um and so yeah, and I hope eventually I would love to go. I know for a long time too, though, it had been not a good country to go over there. The government was really bad. The community, it was just not safe at the time. But now I hear it's like coming back, and it's beautiful there. And and if I had met someone I used to work with, was Vietnamese, and had told me, him growing up, he had family in Vietnam, and then he lived in the US, and would go visit. And he said, at the time it was like very poverty, like very poor. And so, it wasn't manageable to go, but then as government and things got better, then it was easier to go visit. So, and I would love to go visit, you know,
Yeah.
Vietnam.
So would I actually. I'm trying to finagle a trip over there at some point.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah.
there's so many great stories about the Vietnam War and the Vietnam era that only exist over there, right?
Mhm.
I would have to
Yeah,
go, I would have to go there to get those stories. So
yeah.
maybe one day. Maybe one day we'll
Mhm.
get some sponsorship or some underwriting.
Right.
We can expand our story gathering
Exactly.
beyond Zoom and wherever we have budget for me to travel to. But I'm wondering, I as an adopted kid myself, right? 99.5% of the time, I don't really think about my other life that might have been.
Hmm.
I'm a little busy living this one,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But every now and then, I do think about, what would have been my life had I not been adopted.
Right.
In your case, there's there's two possible answers. There's what if you hadn't gotten out of Vietnam,
Hmm.
and there's what if you hadn't been adopted by the Heslins, right? What if you had been
Right.
in that New Orleans uh, uh, orphanage for a
Hmm.
longer period of time? And do you ever?
Right.
How much time do you spend thinking about the alternative lives that you might have lived?
I don't often think about it because I think maybe because I'm so blessed and, I'm so, I picture myself. I think I was meant to be with the Heslins. Like it was, sometimes God had its way. Like I just can't think of any other family. But I do every once in a while be like, what would I be doing if I wasn't here with the Heslins or in the US? What would I be doing in Vietnam? Would I be still, you know, kind of like not with a family, because like if I was an orphan and it was at the Vietnam War, you know, I always wonder, like, and grateful for those who took care of us. I always wonder, those military had to go through, and then help us get to the orphanage. So yeah, I was every once in a while glimpse be like, when I found out later on in years, like I was surrendered by my father, like would I've been still with my dad and been going home to home, because if he was in military, would have ever seen him? So, obviously there was a reason it was best choice for him to drop me off at the orphanage because he knew that he probably couldn't raise me. So I sometimes, I guess it's a good thing, that I don't often think of like, what if my life would have been? Because I think of my life so great, and I can't think of any other life to be than where I'm at right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of painful to imagine, right? He was presumably fighting against the communists, and so
Mm-hmm.
when it became clear that the United States was withdrawing,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, he probably knew that the communists would take over the country, and since he had fought against them, he probably didn't have a lot of confidence about his own future.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and obviously as you get older, you kind of like people ask, well, the Vietnam War, they took your country and I never thought of that because since like yes, because I was born in Vietnam, it was such a tragic war and a war a lot of people think it shouldn't have happened, but also, I'm so thankful and grateful that, I wasn't of the age to remember, that um it's a blessing that I came over here and, um and learned later, you know, um that I was meant to be here,
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and it's tragic. We learn in history, how it all became and stuff. But all I can say is that I'm blessed and I was adopted, and that I was alive enough to come over here. So,
yeah, yeah, and that your father was selfless enough, right?
mm,
Having
yeah,
having an uncertain future himself,
yeah,
he tried to protect you from whatever that might look like.
Yeah. And my mom comes from her relatives have fought in the Vietnam War. So when they heard that they adopted me, you know, it was like a blessing to them because they're like, they fought the war, and then here my parents got a actual Vietnamese baby from the war.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I guess a lot of times growing up, it felt like, why I'm so happy to share the story is also I'm also sharing my story. I'm also, people are so happy that, you know, that I came over, and I'm sharing it because I'm alive to, tell the history. So
Hmm. Well, is there anything else about your story that we haven't covered, or anything that you want to say just about Operation Babylift in general? What you know of the history or anything like that?
no, I don't have much I mean, we kind of cover a lot, but I am just want to say I'm so grateful and thankful, you know, you doing this interview, that me sharing the story and how I met Dennis, I wouldn't have been here today, you know, um, sharing my story. And, I'm so happy that I'm able to touch other people's lives because of my story. Obviously I'm proud to tell my story, and, it comes natural to me. So yeah, I'm so happy that I'm able to share it, because a lot of times you kind of forget, you just kind of go day by day, and don't think of me, we kept talking about being adopted and stuff, life day by day. I just feel like it's just normal. I'm living a normal life, and I'm blessed that I was in this family. So, I think back, and I want to, be thankful and grateful that I had this opportunity, to be here. So, and
Mm.
share it.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm also grateful for you being here to share your story. Um, I guess last question for you. Just want to make sure I don't ask it in a really stupid way. Um,
Because I've had a lot of people ask, "Do you mind if I ask this?" And man, I
no,
don't.
it's not. It's not that. I don't think it'll be sensitive for you, but I don't want to. I don't want to turn this into a propaganda piece at all. I'm wondering. I mean, I have my own. I came to the United States at the age of 4.
Mhm,
That's when I became a naturalized citizen here. So you were younger than I was.
mhm.
Um, and I've heard you refer to yourself a few times in the last hour as Vietnamese, and I still think of myself as German in
Mhm.
in a lot
Oh,
of
are you
ways.
German?
Yeah,
My
yeah,
mom has a little German in her.
yeah. And so uh, it's funny when I'm here, I'm keenly aware of um, how German I am, and when I'm in Germany, I'm keenly aware of how American I am. Right, so
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
but so I have feelings about this country that are complicated by the fact that I also have love for another country, right? Because
Right.
that's where all my people are.
Right.
So I just wonder, when you think, I mean, how does patriotism sit with you? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? Is it?
Well, I mean, patriotism, yes. I mean, I'm so I'd say, and I do say a lot about Vietnamese and my Vietnamese, but I'm Asian American. Like you said, I have my actual same naturalization card, like a little passport. You know, when I became 9 years old, I lived in Chicago at the time, or Highland Park suburbs. I had to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I had to become a citizen.
Mhm.
So I love being in this country. You know, I do love sharing, obviously, being from Vietnam, but the only fault I would say is that I wish I knew a little bit more about my culture. That's the only thing I would say why I don't praise it, not in a bad way. It's just because I was raised in America. So, but I am still proud to be Vietnamese. I'm part of that history of the Vietnam War. But, as far as patriotic, yes, of course, I love being in the USA.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Well, I
yeah,
don't know. I don't know a thing about Vietnam. I've been to 19 countries, Vietnam, none of them in Asia. I've never been to Asia.
neither.
I mean, what I know about Vietnam is just, you know, the food around here that is, I mean, I've never had Vietnamese food in Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
The
Yeah.
Vietnamese food here in the Seattle area is just amazing, amazing
Mhm.
food. Like,
Yeah.
and that's all I know. That's all.
Yeah. Me too. And like, um, other than the food is amazing, also I know they're known for very, very nice silk clothing.
Mm,
you know, um, and supposedly they have really good coffee, Vietnamese coffee.
coffee. You're right. And
And
there
I'm
is
not a coffee drinker, which is crazy because my whole family loves coffee and they make fun of me, and but one of my friends went to Vietnam a couple years ago and she brought me back Vietnamese coffee beans. And so it's still in the freezers. Haven't tried it yet. So, but my mother and sister are excited to try it. But I've heard their coffee is really good over there.
there is one other thing that they're known for: pepper.
Oh yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You go to Costco and you buy the big jug of black pepper seeds,
Uh-huh.
peppercorns,
Yep.
or you buy the one that's already in the grinder.
Yeah.
You turn it over, either one of those products, it'll say product of Vietnam.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's I do hopefully maybe we can do it together. Go to Vietnam and experience good food, good drinks,
Yeah.
clothing and nice people. So yeah.
Yeah. An amazing, amazing
And
history.
hard workers, I will say. Vietnam. I guess maybe part of me, I've always grown up like as soon as I could be age of growing up of like 16, started working at a pizza place in New Jersey, and ever since then, been always loved to help when I can and love to work. So yeah, I guess people are hard workers in Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it would be so fascinating to visit a culture that's so ancient, right? Like
Mhm.
we think about our
Yeah.
history, we're 200 years old. We were born a minute ago, right?
Right.
On
Yeah.
the grand scale of time, and even European history, uh,
Hmm.
you know, doesn't go back more than, I don't know, really maybe 1500 years,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
in Asia, there were civilizations and, rich cultures 5,000 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's why maybe Asians last longer. I'm kidding.
Maybe. Yeah. They're playing the long game. They got a
Yeah,
bigger
they've got
perspective.
there's something in their plants that's keeping them going.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what else? What else have we not talked about?
Hmm. Um, you know, I just I always want sometimes I always wonder like you know why were they the ones to pick me? I've always thought why my sister pick me, and and when I asked my mom and dad, when they first heard about the news, they was so there wasn't even like a question. They were like, we need to do this. And like same thing with my sister, like, you know, in moment when you saw me on TV, like, why did you think to want a sister, like, and not the boy, and and she's just like, when I saw you, all I saw was just that smile and and how cute you were walking down the hallway, and I felt like you need not that to be saved, but she's just like, we just need to take her home. And so, and my parents didn't even like when I asked mom, it was funny because I don't ask my mom a lot of questions like how it became, but just probably recently more so. But I asked her, you know, what, did you even question it? Like, why did you even think of it? Like, my mom said, as soon as we heard that there was two orphan babies coming to Vietnam, we already then thought that we were going to adopt. So,
Even before Maria brought it up.
yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the thing. I was like, was you the first or was Maria the first time? And so they're like, we heard it first, but she initially got it going because she saw you on TV.
It sounds
So,
like they decided that they wanted to adopt one of those two babies, and
uh,
Maria said, "Let's get that one."
exactly. That's how it
Right?
was.
I want
It's
that one.
funny. Exactly. That's how it is. It's funny because it's like, how like speaking of patriarchy, how like Sam goes, I want you.
Yeah,
That's how my sister was. She's like, I want you.
that's
So
fun.
so yeah, it was meant
Well,
to be.
you mentioned that the I didn't even do this math. You mentioned that the 50th anniversary is coming up. I guess that'll be in just
It's
a
so
little more than
soon.
2 years.
two
Yeah.
years, yeah. So,
So
time flies anyways these days. But yeah.
what are you gonna do? How are you gonna? I mean, that's a big milestone.
And then, I would, and that's why I think, you tell me about the Facebook group. I think I'll get added to that because I would like to know where the next one would be at.
Yeah.
So, maybe it'd be DC.
Well, if you end up going to that, I want you to let me know as soon as you decide. Like, give me as much notice as you possibly can,
Absolutely.
because I'll do everything I can to go there with you.
Right. Right. And who knows in a year or two if I'm still in DC, but if it's in DC, regardless where it's at, I'll be there.
Yeah, but even
Yeah.
if it's anywhere in the United States,
Yeah.
wouldn't you like to
Yeah,
go?
absolutely. And and I like I said, I was so happy that I went to the 40th and I'm sorry that I didn't go. Me going to the one in Homedale for the 40th anniversary made me think why I wish I had known sooner to go on to that 25th one, if not, 30th one.
Well, let's
So
talk about that because yeah, I didn't get a chance to follow up on that. So you did go to the one in New Jersey.
I did go to the one in Homedale. Yeah, that's the one I told you my cousin lives in that is
Yeah.
same area.
So
And so
what was
me, my
that like?
mom, and sister went. And it was, like I said, I'm so glad I went. We found out about it and it was a no-brainer to go because we found out that was in the same area where my cousins live. So they were able to take us there.
No, I
You
understand the logistics. I mean,
know.
how did it hit you? How did it hit you to be standing among all these other people who've had a similar experience?
Oh, I very emotional, you know, and blessed for all of them as well as myself that we're all in the same room, has the same similar, or if not, a little different um story than mine. They all got adopted, um and I met some people, you know, some were all over some were from like California, Washington State. I think there was one that was in the Midwest too, lived in like I think Michigan, Ohio. So they were just, they all wanted to come and we all wanted to know that time area, and maybe they have or have not been to others. And obviously that was my first time being there. But I was very moved. My mother was very emotional. And so was my sister, because I think when we went, it was even some more, little bit of, more depth stories that I didn't even know about, you know, going through the room and seeing the wall of their wall that they had at the memorial and seeing all these pictures and some of them are very graphic, and obviously I was very moved because I could have been one of them still there, not alive or alive, but I got saved and came over. So, you know. So yeah, like I said, the only thing I am sad about, or now it won't be anymore, or at fault, is that I didn't contact with more with some of the people that were there that day, and in that community. So this pushes me to reach out now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope it's enriching for you.
Hmm.
I hope you get
Yeah,
I hope you get a lot out of it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, everybody's had, their own unique experience
Hmm.
since being adopted.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
everybody,
I'd be
but everybody
curious
started
too.
at the same place, right? Everybody started at the same place, which was on a big cargo plane
Hmm.
trying to get out of Saigon in a hurry.
Yeah, yeah. I can't even imagine how that, and like I said, I'm so glad that I was at the age I was, I guess I should say, because your memory, I didn't know all that. Like, I don't remember me going thrown in a plane. I don't remember like how the surrounding was, down in the orphanage in Vietnam. There were some pictures, where we were at in Saigon area where they kept us. You could tell there was a bunch of Vietnamese babies in a small contained building, you know. And so I guess I'm blessed that I don't remember that. But then, not to say it's a good or bad thing not to remember it, because, you then maybe I could have kind of seen what it would have been like, if I was older,
Mhm.
the situation. But like I said, um, I'm just thankful that, I was able to get out, and I'm
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a great situation.
Well, I think if it's on your bucket list to go, then I hope you do. I hope you do it.
Yeah.
They say that the sense that is the most closely tied to memory is the sense of smell,
Mm,
and so I, it would be fascinating to know if you ever do step off of a plane in Vietnam,
yeah.
what comes back
Yeah.
once
You
you
know,
feel
that's a good way you mention it, because that's true. I would love to, hopefully, God willing, that I will get to go.
it.
And what my first experience would be like getting off the plane, like you said, it'd be very interesting. Needless to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean things that you don't even realize are tucked away in your memory might all of a sudden,
Mhm.
as nebulous as they might be and unclear and hazy,
Mhm.
it might all just come rushing out.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. And you've been back to Germany.
Oh yeah, I spent half my childhood there, and I still have family there. I mean,
Okay.
been back to Germany many times. Yeah,
Okay. Nice.
and yeah, it like every place on earth, the part of Germany where I'm from also has a smell.
Hmm.
Like even the houses, I think it's just the building materials that they use.
Hmm.
You walk into a house and it just smells like a German house. And I haven't found it here.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of the first things that hits me when I go back. It's not a good smell or a bad smell.
Right.
It's just a smell, right? It just
Mhm.
is, one of the things that lights up when I go there.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that would be now that's a book. If I once I land my first foot down in Vietnam, that's where it starts.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad I could help. And so now I also get a cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Now you and my sister are both on
Yeah,
my list.
that's right. So your share of this book revenue is getting smaller and smaller, Leah. You better hurry up and
That's
write
all
it.
right. I better hurry up and find that lottery ticket.
Right. Right.
Or the lottery ticket might make my trip to Vietnam.